sometimes it's important when we start to feel comfortable that, well, maybe now's the time to get uncomfortable again, because I don't think we truly reach our full potential until we are pushed out of our comfort zone and start pushing ourselves in these different avenues.
Welcome to Flip Your Script, the podcast about life's critical turning points and how people find the inspiration and motivation to move forward and rewrite their unique stories. Produced by Media Minefield, the show is hosted by Christy Peel, who flipped her script from an Emmy-winning journalist to a successful entrepreneur and speaker.
Media Minefield started after I was laid off from my job as a TV reporter. And in my career, I met a lot of local and national news people. You're taught not to become the story. You report the story. But every now and then, a news person lets you in and decides to lift the curtain between their professional life and their personal life. Cory Hepola, a friend of mine, is one of those people. He's a former TV news anchor and sports reporter and now the host of Hey, It's Cory on WCCO Radio in Minneapolis and St. Paul. He's a husband, father, and I just learned this fun fact, the first conference MVP for basketball in Purim, Minnesota's history. Recently, he was named Twin Cities Business 100 People to Know in 2020, and I am sure grateful that this year I've had the opportunity to get to know him. Cory, thanks for joining me.
Christy, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to get into your story because some of your loyal listeners, your fans, they may not even be really aware of the part of the story we're going to talk about, not because you're not willing to talk about it, but just doesn't come up that much. And we have so much in common. So I'm really excited that you're on the Flip Your Script podcast. So I think that your story will inspire someone, and thank you again.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so. I think we share a lot in common. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk about that transition. You did TV for a long time, and then you are now on the radio. And there's a lot of differences between those two worlds, which I hope we get into. But talk about that transition.
It was just that. It was a transition. I thought I was a TV lifer. I thought I would be in TV for the rest of my life. And because I just, even at 8 years old, it's all I ever wanted to do. I knew exactly what I wanted to do at 8. And I followed that passion through high school and through college, and from my first job in North Dakota and Montana and upstate New York and in Texas, and then and even in DC, and then back home to Minneapolis and here in Minnesota, and I just thought that that's what I would want to do for the rest of my life. And I think I just got to a point where internally and I could just feel it in my heart that I felt like I had something more to offer and something larger, and I kind of felt like maybe there was a larger purpose. And when the opportunity at CCO kind of budded, it was like, wow, this is a way for us to kind of maybe share that purpose with others. And I feel like we're doing that. Well, Christy, too, the worlds are completely different. TV, it's like 15 seconds here, 15 seconds there, 15 seconds there, and in radio, it's like, okay, you got 3 hours and you've got this canvas every single day. And it's a spot for you to kind of be able to use your voice in a different way.
And people do radio and people do TV and people write print and all those people are journalists, but they're really different. Very few people say, you know what, I'm going to try this and I'm going to be good at that. And then I'm going to try this and I'm going to be good at that. You didn't even know if you'd be that good doing radio, right?
I don't know that I am good at radio. No, you're right. I mean, I had no idea. I knew that I had crafted and worked very, very hard at my craft in television for a long time. And I knew that I felt comfortable in that. And I think sometimes it's important when we start to feel comfortable that, well, maybe now's the time to get uncomfortable again, because I don't think we truly reach our full potential until we are pushed out of our comfort zone and start pushing ourselves in these different avenues. So I had no idea. I didn't do radio in college or in high school. I'd never done it. I didn't even do any practice shows with WCCO. I literally went in. I anchored at KARE 11 on a Saturday or Sunday, and then like the next day was my first show. So it was pretty wild looking back.
Well, first of all, just to set the record straight, you are good at radio. And I think people who listen to you know that. And you can find all your shows online and you do podcasts and that sort of thing. So if you haven't listened to Cory, prove him wrong that he's good at radio. But like, When you think about going from getting uncomfortable and making that kind of switch and really flipping your script, it's easy to do when you're a single person, right? It's a lot different to do when you have a wife and children. So there's a little bit more on the line. Did that scare you?
I thought about it. I think I had great role models. My parents are small business owners, and my dad, when he must have been in his low 30s, had a nice job and was comfortable there. And he was working as in management at a grocery store and was happy. But he had it on his heart that I'm an entrepreneur. I want to start something. And that to me is big risk. He left without knowing, boy, I have no idea. We might not have an income. I don't know. And that was a huge risk. But I've always idolized and looked up to my dad and admired that in him, that, you know what, he has a strong faith. So do I. And I kind of admired that sense of adventure, but also calling, knowing that's your call. And my dad felt that. And so to me, like, that was real risk. Like with CCO, it was a risk because I could have been really bad and it might not have worked out and I could have embarrassed myself. But at least I had an income. I knew that for a year I'm going to have an income. And I just thought, it's worth the challenge. It's worth the risk. But also too, I felt it in my heart that I wouldn't fail. I mean, I don't know. I had this strong pull, and I think that's how I knew it was the right thing, was that felt like the Lord was leading me.
And what's interesting about your story is that you're doing TV, you're doing, fine. You've worked your whole life for this career. And then you explored. You weren't forced. You explored, what if I could do something different? What made you start exploring the calling? What made you start exploring a different purpose? Because like you said, when you're comfortable doing something, it's easy just to be a lifer.
That's an interesting question. And I think I've reflected on that more maybe in the last couple of years than I have before. I kind of look back at my life in particular, and I've found that I've always kind of I've set short-term and long-term goals. And so even as like a kid in eighth grade, I got cut from basketball, and I was so upset about that. And a part of it was, hey, they said you probably should have made it, but your attitude, you didn't have a good attitude, and so therefore we just felt like you wouldn't play a role on this team, and I was so embarrassed, and I just made it my point, like, I'm never going to be outworked, and I don't want that to ever be the narrative about me. And I just changed my attitude, and I got to work, and you had mentioned it in the intro, and then by senior year, I was the first ever Heart of the Lakes Conference MVP in basketball. When I got a plaque for that basketball award, and I have it up as a symbol and as a reminder, because I was so emotional when Coach came and gave me a hug that 4 years later that day when I was named MVP, because he knew the journey and the changed person I had become. And I'm so thankful for the teachers and coaches and my parents for along the way.
It's so interesting because, talent is one thing, but attitude is something you can change. And I don't know that we talk enough maybe about that there are these things happening. And right now, when people hear this, we may or may not be still in a protection order and be at home, right? But right now you're at home in your kid's bedroom doing this. I'm in a guest room doing it because we can't be in a studio together. And circumstances, there are things outside of our control, but there are things we can change, and attitude is one. And to learn that young, that is such a gift.
Yeah, and I think absolutely. And I think there are reminders that life gives us along the way too. It's easy to remember and go back to that story, and it changed my life. Like I ended up being, and I was before that too, but teachers enjoyed me. I was a good student. I was very nice. I was voted friendliest. You know what I mean? So I've always been that guy since then, and that's kind of carried through. But you always have these reminders along the way too. I've been laid off a couple times in TV and been struggled with depression, and when those particular times have come, I think those are when you go back on those lessons learned. And also too, if you have good people around you that support you and love you, you're able to kind of maybe see that, where, look, you can't control everything that's in your life, but you can control your outlook and your attitude. And what you can do about that is either you can look at it, okay, things are going to change for me. I'm going to take my life in my own hands for what I can control and be a positive person and not let this negative thing that's outside of my control ruin my life, because I'm not going to allow that. And Camille told me that, after I'd been laid off and we had just had our first child, and I was really, here you have this the most amazing thing ever, your first child, you become a dad, but then I was laid off in Houston, and it was just, you had the juxtaposition of this, like the amazing thing and then the worst thing possible. And I was really having a hard time. And she just said, hey, you can't control everything that happens to you, but you can control your happiness. And that was just a reminder. It's very true.
And so you've lost your job. You've had a lot of different, as many journalists, many ups and downs and bumps along the road. When you think about rejection and identity, did losing your job and having some of the rejection you've experienced, did that help you set your identity in a place where it wasn't connected to these circumstances and decisions that other people could make on your behalf?
Yeah, I think, and I know that you know this because I think you were kind of the same way, and where your identity was as a journalist. That's who I was. It was in your career. That's how you were fully identified. And yes, I mean, that was something that I've dealt with too, because I've taken such a great pride in work ethic and in career, and having the same or a similar goal for so long, it does become your identity. And I think that's something, even through the rejections and the layoffs, I think it's continued through that. And that's something I'm constantly working on that. And I think I kind of got there after it was probably a couple of years ago, to be honest, even after the layoffs, and I was at KR11, and I just kind of thought, and I think that's been kind of, along with this next step to CCO radio, that's kind of been the process of, I don't need to be known as from my hometown or whatever, that, oh, he's a TV guy, or I don't need that. I'm Cory. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a Vikings fan. Like there's so many things. I don't need to be just defined as what we do, but I guess overall I would like to be known as the guy that's positive and makes a difference, and I think that if we set our mind on that, then, typically we do good things in our life.
And your platform now to do that is radio, but to your point, it would be fine with you if it was something else at some point. It's not about the radio, it's about the purpose, which is a really big shift.
Absolutely. And you're right on. I mean, I have no idea where none of us do. I have no idea where the Lord's going to take any of us, including myself. I don't know. But I do know that I guess before I started at you'd asked about the transition. So flipping your script. So when I'm at Care 11, there was just something internal, and I just knew it. My purpose was changing. And so I wrote down all these things. I did strength finders, and it was so empowering. And it was like, man, I knew I was good at these things, or these were strengths of mine, but now to see it on paper is completely empowering. Like, for instance, I'm so energetic, and I like to network, and I like to meet people. And I would get in forever. I'm in a journalist, and I'm going to all these games, or I'm doing all these stories, and people are super competitive, and they're not really talking to you. Or I'm the first one to always go up and talk to people. I thought there was something wrong with me. And I did strength finders, and I'm like, no, actually that's a strength. Like, you love to communicate, and you're a wooer, and you like to talk to people. And I thought, no, okay, it was empowering for me to do that and to find that out. And so it was kind of like, I got to the point in TV where I'm like, I don't need to be in TV anymore. I don't. And I listed off my strengths and my purpose in life and my mission and my values, my core values. And I keep that in my briefcase, not really a briefcase, but in my bag, wherever I go every single day, so that it doesn't leave me. I have it in my phone because this is who I am, and this is the purpose for the rest of my life.
That's so interesting, because I think, for me, I didn't get to the point of doing all of that work until I had to. My hand was forced. So I love the concept and the advice, really, to work on all of those things when you don't need to, because it's just good for you to have, and it's good work for your soul. It's good work for the people around you. And then when you need that, you can lean on it, and it may shift when you're leaning on it the course of your life. But it's hard work to do when you have to do the work. It's so much better to do that work when you have the space. And yet I don't think a lot of people do, because even as an eighth grader, thinking about goals, short-term and long-term goals, I mean, that's a little aggressive for a lot of teenagers. And yet it really has made an impact and something you've carried your whole life. So it's this having a plan about who you are, not what you do, which is really a flip for a lot of people.
It's yeah, it's funny. Being at home now with coronavirus, we have more time to like do. I've got these bins downstairs that my parents kept of like, oh, here's some of your high school stuff and whatever. And I've got a work bin that I kept from the journey through work along the way, and through high school and through college. I still have these sheets of paper that I typed out or wrote that laid out specifically short-term goals, what I want to do, where I want to go. And I don't do it anymore because I have it in my phone and it's not as specific. And that's another point too I want to make. But I found these. I ran into these things that I wrote in 2000 and in 2002 and 4, and I would hang them on my wall and tape them up as a reminder of here's where you're going, here's where you want to go. But I do think it's important too. One thing that I learned along the way, and I learned this from Richard Davis, who was one of the mentors that I really reached out to in terms of leadership, and he helped me actually just kind of get to a point where it's like, I don't need to be in TV. It's more about what am I feeling inside and how can I help others and live out that purpose. But Richard said too, he's like, one of the things that people get caught up in, they get too specific in their goals, and it's like, I have to be the CEO of this, or I have to be this. And then if you don't get that particular thing, you live life, always trying to get that one thing. But then two, it can cause frustration. You may have all these other great things happening in your life, or an avenue here that the Lord's taking you to, or an avenue there where it could be even better for you, but you're just so locked and loaded in on this one particular thing that you don't see in the periphery of all these other wonderful things that or paths where you could be led to. And I think that's where maybe the flip the script and the change came for me, Christy, was after that conversation where it's like, oh, okay, the goal is this, and it's an umbrella, but the core values and the mission remain the same. And how I get there to whatever that looks like, I don't know, and that's okay. But if we're true to our mission and our core values, good things are going to happen.
Right. And the other thing, you mentioned it earlier, but you said don't get too tied into one thing. And the problem is if you do get tied into the one thing and then you achieve it, now what? Without having the bigger, here's my purpose, there's always more. But if you get really tied to the one thing, you're good. At some point, you can check that box. And people, I think, they get empty inside when they've checked the box and there isn't the next striving, something to, you got to get up in the morning excited to do something. And it usually isn't the job title.
Yeah. And to be honest, and I love these people. They saved my career, and they have been nothing but great to me. But I care 11. And that's kind of where I got. I got to the point where, and I don't want this to come across as arrogance or anything, but I kind of got to the point where I could check that box. There was nothing left for me to maybe prove or to do. And I felt like we did so many great stories that affected people's lives. And I won a couple of Emmys for my anchoring. And I kind of felt like I don't know. What am I just going to go after awards? Like that's not it. Like that's not a fulfillment. And that's kind of where I got to, where it's like, okay, what's next? I could check the box, and it was what's next, but now it's more true in terms of, well, where are you leading me? And the Lord led me to here, and I'm thankful for it.
So many careers have seasons, and there are folks who are lifers in many different roles, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's where they're supposed to be. They're getting fulfilled doing that. But other people have change, and they're brought to different opportunities, different cities, different companies, different whatever it may be. So it's really powerful, I think, to think about what the purpose is, what the bigger picture is. And then it may be connected to a job and it may not. It may make you make a change, it may not. But at least even to be open to the idea. I mean, the beautiful thing that my layoff taught me is that it's not about the job. That's one thing. I love doing the work. I absolutely did. And I'm so grateful for my time there. But had I not been forced my hand to be laid off, I would have never explored what else is inside of me, which I didn't know until now that communication and woo, which are two of my top 5 strengths, are also must be two of yours.
They are. Yeah, they are. Absolutely. And going into a room and talking to everybody and winning over the room, that's me. And I love to do that. And I think I find energy, and that's why even this time now has been kind of a challenge because we're staying at home and I'm probably a extreme extrovert. And so it's challenged me to kind of like, okay, how are you, still using your time and being valuable with your time as an extrovert during this time.
And you mentioned, sadness, darkness. You use the word depression. I don't know if that's medical or not, or if that's more about, because I want to make sure that if people really have serious depression issues, they get some help. And in your life, it may have been an attitude. And are you struggling with that now?
I'm glad you came back on that because I'll tell the story because it's so in 2006 I had been this would have been like my third job in like 4 years. And so every single time I'm alone, I'm single, I'm picking up and I'm moving. And mind you, I got done with college early. So I picked up and I moved to Washington, D.C. for 6 months. I got back home, didn't have a job. And then I pick up and I go to Montana and I'm there for 2.5 years, meet all these great people. I pick up and I move to upstate New York. And that was kind of an eye opener for me too, because, I'm a Midwestern guy, I'm an extrovert, I'm a wooer, and people are more direct. And so learning how people communicate there differently. And this time now I'm in a small station, but I'm the sports director. So I'm in charge of a department. And we did not have great resources. We did not have great leadership. And I move out there and I'm extremely anxious. Now I'm a happy person. I'm not really fully understanding what's going on with me. I must have been 24 and I was so anxious. And it was just, and I was not making great decisions. Somebody who didn't drink till he was 21 was all of a sudden drinking too much. And it was harmful. And now there's one time I can remember, I should be clear. It's not like I'm drinking on the job or anything, but it was like right after work, it's drinking. And then it's the next day is you don't feel that great, but then you drink. And so I kind of got into this routine of doing that and I was very unhappy. And I remember specifically, I was driving down the road and I couldn't stop. My breath, I was having a panic attack. I had to pull over on the side of the road. I could not breathe. I was so anxious about everything. And finally I got over that. And fortunately I talked about it and I maintain a very good relationship with my parents. I'm very close and they encouraged me to go see somebody. And I think the stigma now of mental health, we're in such a better place now than we were then. But back then I was embarrassed. I thought it showed weakness, and thankfully we're in a better spot now. And that's one of the pillars of my show is to help break down this stigma of mental health, that it's a weakness, because it's not. But I went and saw somebody and it saved my life. Like I got on a medication and it's exactly what I needed at that time. And it was, it was for 2 years. It was an anti-anxiety pill, but they were saying that anxiety was causing me to be depressed. And so for 2 years I was on this, and you know what? I haven't been on it since. But it was that period of time in my life where I needed that because of all these changes that were going on that were causing me such great anxiety. So I've kind of wanted to just share that, and I've shared that on my show too, but I hope to share that because I think people, maybe they look at certain people or they might look at me and they're like, man, he's married, got a great job, he's got terrific hair. He must have never. No, I've gone through it too, and I've gone through it, and it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make it. In fact, I think there's a great strength in reaching out to get help.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And I didn't understand the seriousness of mental health or the struggle with it. I had postpartum with my second child, and it was so real and so surprising. And thank goodness I stepped outside of the TV station at the time, and I called my husband, and I was crying, and I said, I don't remember the last time I bought diapers. And he said, I'm so glad you realized that. I didn't know how to tell you. I've been doing everything. And I called the doctor immediately and was put on medication, and it made a big difference. And it was a short amount of time. But I think mental health is one of those things that it's like words until it's you. And then it's, and I'm glad people are talking about it more. And I don't have the opportunity to bring that up because it just doesn't, my son, it's his birthday today. He's 13, that baby. And I don't think about that time in my life. But when people talk about mental health, it's deeper for me, like it is for you, because once you've been there, it's real.
And thank you for sharing. And I think it's important for us to share those stories. I had repressed that time in my life because it was so difficult. It was a very difficult 2 years being at that station. And I ended up having friends around, and it was great, but it was a very difficult time for me until I met Camille, and then my life really kind of changed. But those were kind of early memories that I repressed. And it wasn't until maybe we talked about purpose again a couple of years ago where, and more specifically when I started the show and wanted mental health to be a pillar of it and to be a champion for it. And so that people could learn more about it and feel strength in sharing their story, that I told mine, but I had kind of pushed it way down because it's not something you bring up. But that was a very defining time in my life, and thankfully, and this goes back to surrounding yourself with good people who love you, because they will notice that something is just, maybe you're just not quite yourself, or maybe you need to see somebody or to talk to somebody, and that's good. That's okay. And just because you have something that you're dealing with doesn't mean you're going to deal with it your entire life either. For both of us, it was a short period, but those are the times where it's important that we interject and meet with the people and talk with the people that we need to.
And having good people around you is so important, having strong relationships. And yet, even your parents, because you weren't living in their home anymore, you can fake it on the phone, I'm sure, to them. They may have thought maybe something, but you had to realize it yourself. And that's a hard thing to do, is to get to the point where, especially people, I think, wired like we are, I don't need help. I'm good. You need help. How can I help you? So it's important to have people around who you can call, because not everyone has that. And that's a point that I wanted, talk about on the show, is through struggle comes really powerful life change that is good, but struggle is hard, and ways to get through struggles. And in all these stories that we're going to talk about on the podcast, so many of them, it's about people. It's about having strong relationships, having love, having people around you that you can rely on to make that struggle just a little bit easier.
Yeah. And I think we start off in life and we think that, okay, it's going to be, this is mine and I'm going to be able to control everything, and it's going to be a straight path. And yeah, there might be a little up and down, but what we don't realize, and even if we're Christians or of any religious faith, you think that, oh, okay, I'll be, I won't have to deal with these things. No, that's not true. I mean, it's just like everybody, we're going to have to deal with, our road is littered with ups and downs and potholes and sticks and trees, and everything's in the way, right? But we keep going, and it's also too, those are the times where we really grow, and those are the times we really learn. And I remember, looking for that second job. Was in Fargo, and new ownership came in and been laid off. And I thought, oh boy, that's it. Like, I don't know if I'm going to ever get another job in TV. And I just remember taking time to just slow things down and really think about what I wanted, where I was going. And you know what? It took me 150 rejections, but I got there, and it was the exact place that I needed to go. And I'm thankful for it, but I'm also thankful for the process of knowing, because it also added that perspective layer of, man, I am so thankful to be in the industry that I want to be in. I'm so thankful to have a job.
so much a mindset, right?
Hmm.
You can look at it, right now we're all trapped in our homes. And that's one thing. The whole world is in the same boat pretty much. And you can look at it as all the negatives, all the things we're missing, or all the things that we're learning. And we're learning so much. And there are positives and there are silver linings. But you got to look for them, and you have to be open to look for them. And that doesn't mean you can't be sad. It doesn't mean you can't have
Nope.
a bad day. It doesn't mean you can't, cry. But it's really that mindset that makes all the difference. And if you need help, ask for help.
Yeah, perspective is everything. I think it's been easy. Like 3 weeks ago, when this, I guess I'm not sure when it aired, but like March 11th, when this whole thing kind of really exploded with the coronavirus, it was really affecting me. And I'm in it. I do 3 hours of topical stuff every day, and it's hard, and it's hard to understand where it's going, how it's going to affect everybody, and we're seeing just the catastrophe that it is now, and it stinks. It really does. But I think there was a certain point where, after about 5 days, where again I was reminded of that. Look, we can't control everything, but we can control our outlook. And the sun was shining, and I'm like, sun's shining. It's great. We can go for a walk. Think about all the things, like we have internet. We, I mean, we have a house. We have food. And that's when it really flipped for me. I'm like, that's the perspective that we need. Is that, no, we didn't ask for this. It's not fun, and people's lives are at stake, both physically and also too when we talk about careers. But at the same time, we can also choose to try to be positive and uplifting, and also have that perspective of, there are also so many things we can be thankful for, because all of us can. We all have them.
And back to relationships and people, the folks that are in the trenches, the folks that are saying goodbye to loved ones, that are working in ERs. I think it's the people around them, and the hope that they can see, because there is tomorrow, and it's hard. And none of us, what we're dealing with our negatives is nothing compared to someone who's saying goodbye to someone in a hospital right now, right? And it could always be worse. And it's so important to be grateful for what we have, and to think about those that don't have that, because people are going to come out of this. We're going to go back to work, right? We're going to go back to work. We're going to be healthy. We're going to go back to the gym. Someday I'm going to get my hair done again, right? And and that is nothing compared to what people are going through.
Yep, and then that goes back to purpose, right? I always felt like, I remember when I started at Care, because I was like, man, we get to go back home, my home state. I'm so thankful. And I had that perspective after being laid off in Houston. But also too, that was the first time I'm like, with that position at Care 11, I'm like, this is great. It comes with a great responsibility too. And it's our responsibility to use that platform for good, and to give back in our ways. And I look at it like, all of us have special gifts. We've all been uniquely blessed in a particular way. And it's important for us to give back of those gifts, and to use those gifts. And I know, like, I'm a people person, and I'm a public speaker. So I'm like, okay, let's donate our time to help out with these organizations. And so that's one way to do it. And for other people, it's financially, but we all have a calling to give back, and there are people out there who really need us. And it's important for us to give back with our unique talents.
It's a great point. And before I ask the last question, I just want to make sure we get it in there. How can people find you? Where can they find you online?
They can find just Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all just Cory Hepola. So just Cory Hepola on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. If they want to subscribe to the show, that would be great. Radio.com, and just search WCCO Radio or Cory Hepola, and we'll pop right up. That'd be awesome. Subscribe to the show.
And we'll put all those links on flippyourscriptpodcast.com as well. So the final question, thank you for a fantastic conversation, Cory. What's a quote from a book or a song that really motivated you to flip your script?
Well, this is my favorite. I'm going to go the Bible. We all may have heard of it, but this is one that really stood out to me, and it's become my favorite verse. And it's one that, after I was laid off in Houston, let me just set it real quickly. So, over the course of my career, it was 16-year TV career, but I'd been laid off twice, rejected by 350 plus TV stations. But the second time I was laid off was in Houston, and it was at a point where, you work your whole life to get an anchor job in Houston. And I'd gotten there, and I was so thankful and grateful, and we were doing tremendous work. And then me and 100 of my friends were laid off, and it was devastating. It was devastating. And then I had mentioned it was 3 weeks before my son was born. And so elated about that. But then the reality set in after that. It's, you don't have a job, you can't provide, and I'm in TV looking, and I'm getting nowhere. And I ran into this devotion, and this verse from Romans chapter 5, verses 3-5 has become my favorite verse, and it helped me to flip my script. It's I'll read it for you. We also rejoice in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. And hope does not disappoint us, because God has poured out his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom he's given us. And I think it's just such a it's such a beautiful verse, because it has everything in there. Look, life is going to be painful at times. We're going to have to learn painful lessons. We're going to have to go through painful things. We are going to suffer, all of us. But through those lessons, we can persevere, and through that perseverance shows true character, and always we have hope. And it's beautiful. And every time I read it, I don't know, I tear up, but it reminds me of that particular time, but it's one that I remember moving forward in my life too.
Thank you for sharing that. And, if we were together right now, I'd give you a hug, but I can't, because that's against the law practically right now. So I look forward to when we can be face to face, and I appreciate you coming on the show. And it's fun to flip the script a little bit and ask you some questions. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Christy. And I just hope that people out there, I hope that they're able to just pick something from this and at least feel better about themselves and or learn something too. So thank you.
And the things I really love about Cory's story, talking about people and the importance of having good people around you. And if you need help, ask for it. And he mentioned over 300 rejections, and yet it was about having a purpose, having goals. And his story really is about bravery, to step out in faith, do what you feel called to do, even if there isn't a safety net or it just seems straight up crazy. My hope is that Cory's Flip Your Script story empowers you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Script, hosted by Christy Peel and produced by Media Minefield. If you like our message, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also check out flipyourscriptpodcast.com for pictures, resources mentioned in the show, and information about our other great episodes.